This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Podcast Season 4, Episode 36. My name is Tim Mitchell. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Greetings, peoples.
And we also have down there in Seattle, up there in Seattle. He's north of us, actually. In Seattle, Washington, we have Jaime Lopez Jr.
How's it going? Yeah, for the fun with maps thing, we talked about this once, I think, that there are more Americans living north of Canadians or something like that.
North of Toronto.
Yeah, it's like Toronto is a pretty heavy center for...
Yeah, we're like 3.5 million or something, 3.8 million, something like that in the GTA, John, do you know?
In the GTA, it's actually closer to 11 or 12 million across the entire GTA. It's a third of the population of the entire country lives in this one area.
Yeah. So I guess your stat is correct there, Jaime.
But then what we consider large and what Americans consider large are all relative, because there are much more large and populous cities in America, at least one per state, and we only have like 3 large cities by American standards.
Yeah. Well, they have to do something with all those pennies, right? So
That's right.
Alrighty. Well, no fact check. We were just perfect last week. Can't imagine that, but there we go. We were. We'll head to the headlines with Jonathan.
Yeah, so we had talked about this in a previous episode, but now we've got a little bit of timing on it. So we talked about the fact that Star Trek the Motion Picture was going to get a fancy 4K redo that was going to be coming out this year. We found out about that last year, but they hadn't really put a timeline to it. We know it was coming to Paramount Plus. So this week we got the news that we have a date, and we have lots of information with it. So Star Trek the Motion Picture the Director's Edition is making its debut exclusively on Paramount Plus on April 5th, 2022. And April 5th is...
I don't know.
It's First Contact Day.
Oh.
That's the day that Zefram Cochrane flies into space and meets the Vulcans.
Like in 2022 or 2020? Yeah.
No, not 2022, but April 5th is the date.
Oh, okay. I got excited there for a minute.
No. We have to have World War III first. Don't worry. That'll be coming next week. So apparently it is, available to stream exclusively on Paramount Plus in 4K Ultra HD. The newly restored film, according to StarTrek.com, will be coming later this year on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray in September. And it's going to be also coming to theaters. Now, I don't know whether it's coming to Canada. It says it's coming via Fathom Events and Paramount Pictures. An exclusive 2-day event on May 22nd and May 25th. Tickets go on sale Friday, April 8th at fathomevents.com.
Wait, tickets? What?
You can see it, this restored version, the Director's Edition, in the theaters. If you want to sit there and watch Models of the Enterprise for 10 straight minutes. And
but it's a director's cut. Like, wasn't that part of the problem? Was that the studio made it longer than the director actually wanted? Like, are we like getting a real director's edit?
Well, okay, so the story says, in 2001, director Robert Wise revisited the film to refine the edit and enhance the visual effects. His updated vision was released on DVD in standard definition and embraced by the fans, but it's never been available in higher definition till now. So this is an edition that we could have seen before. Meticulously assembled, I love the words.
Scanned from the original film, and
the whole 9 yards, but basically what happened was, it says the film successfully launched the Star Trek franchise beyond the original television series, despite having been rushed to theaters with incomplete special effects and forced editing choices. I guess when he went back into it, what he did was he cleaned up the visual effects and he cleaned up some of the incongruities because they were trying to edit it so quickly. I don't think it's significantly shorter. So there's still the 10-minute, let's all get, excited over seeing the Enterprise from 47 different angles and
27 years,
yeah, and the excruciatingly long Spock goes into the rug space. And it's still going to be the same movie, which is to say, not good. But But yeah, I mean, it's nice, obviously, to have that sort of, Jaime, you've talked about that a bunch of times, just the upscaling that is long overdue for some of these projects. So it'll be nice to have that one available.
I suppose, but I did, when we bought the 10 disc set or whatever it was, 10 movie set on iTunes last year or whatever, I watched it, and I'm going to wait another 10 years before I watch that again. You know what? That said, I'll probably will watch this stupid movie anyway, but the trailer does make it look like prettier. But,
so here's something to sort of possibly push you towards going and seeing it when they show it in the theater. If it's coming here to Canada.
No, not the theater.
No, in the theaters, because Xavier's never seen this movie.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Not ever.
So will we have Orion slave girls rub our feet while we watch it? I mean, like,
I imagine we'd have to. I can't see why we wouldn't.
Yeah, because I can't imagine, sitting through this consciously.
Do you know anywhere in the neighborhood we can buy lots of green body dye?
I don't know. Don't know. No. Yeah, well, I probably do, actually. I shouldn't say that. Never say never.
So I looked up a link, and I threw this in the show notes. So nationaltoday.com has this for First Contact Day timeline. 1966 Star Trek debuts on NBC. 1979 Star Trek The Motion Picture is released. Star Trek First Contact in 1996. And then 2063, humans and Vulcans make contact for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And apparently you can celebrate by watching Star Trek First Contact, making yourself some cheese pierogies, and greeting everyone with the Vulcan salute.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, the cheese pierogies are apparently some of Zefram Cochrane's favorite food, which
really
is that I would have missed that in a pub trivia quiz for sure.
No doubt. Jaime, I would have, I don't want to get your hopes too high here, but of the three of us, you have the strongest chance of still being here in 2063. So I'm just saying, maybe next time you're looking at that box of donuts, think a little harder about whether or not you want to see Zefram Cochrane make contact with the Vulcans.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true, unless Guinan changes the timeline.
Oh, Lord.
Just trying to remember now, the guy who plays Zefram Cochrane, I saw him at the airport once. Like in the line with me at the airport. I didn't speak to him, but...
Which one? The original guy or the new guy?
No, the original guy. The Stretch Cunningham from All in the Family. What's his name?
Oh, from Babe.
Yeah, I don't remember his name now.
Oh, God, what's his name? Yeah, Cromwell. James Cromwell.
James Cromwell, yes, of course.
He's like super tall, isn't he? In real life, he's like
he's like
6'7" or something.
That's why I said you couldn't not notice him. He was huge.
Yeah.
Like a basketball player tall, right?
Yeah.
So new guy,
sure.
You meant not Glenn Corbett, who I had to look up. Was the original guy.
From Zefram Cochrane? It was from the 66 series? Or?
Yeah, I mean, Tim, that was totally plausible that you could have, met him at some point. I'm going to look. I bet you he's Canadian. Let me take a look. Oh, he's American. Never mind.
James Cromwell's American, but he is 6'7".
No, Glenn Corbett.
Glenn Corbett. Oh.
I do remember being at I think it was one of the first times I went to Fan Expo or Comic-Con with Jonathan and Nimoy, and I think Nimoy and Shatner were there doing autographs.
In the early 2000s, they came together.
And it was super expensive, a couple $100 or something.
Easily, yeah. It was easily $200 just to be in the room with them and get an autographed picture or something.
Yeah, and that was
that was 20 years ago.
Now you pay that or you pay close to that kind of money for. I remember Stan Lee was pretty much that sort of same price range too. But I remember that thinking at the time that was ludicrous, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what would you pay now for that, for a Nimoy autograph, right?
I don't know. I like getting autographs sometimes. I definitely like getting autographs from artists and writers whose work I admire. But for them, I really want to pick their brains. I like sitting there and if I can get a sketch from an artist, if they're doing sketching, I like that because I like to watch them work.
Yeah, no,
and I like talking to the writers because they're the ones who sort of conceived these ideas. So I want to, pick their brain about these sort of how they approach the process and stuff like that. I got to be honest. I've interviewed dozens of them over the years. I don't like talking to actors.
You don't like talking to actors? Yeah.
Actors are not very bright animals generally. That has been my experience. There are some great ones. I've talked to some really interesting ones. I shouldn't belittle the entire profession, but there's a lot of them that I've spoken to who just they're good at the one thing that they're good at. They don't seem like they really are super articulate about their craft, which is disappointing. I imagine that that's probably a bit of an old cliche, maybe less so now than it was when I was doing that stuff 20 years ago. But God, yeah, there's some people out there. People are like, "Oh, you've met so and so. What are they like?" I'm like, dumb, dumb,
yeah,
or possibly on drugs, maybe both.
No, it's not that. I mean, I went to, as you know, I went to a fine arts school, so half of a third of the students were theater students, and yeah, they can be a little performant, if you want to call it that. Like they have their definite moments when they're on and off and that kind of stuff. So I think it's part of their particular artistic quirks that they're not genuine or don't seem to be genuine. You know, they're sort of hiding behind a mask, as it were.
Something like that, yep.
Alrighty. I've skipped down to the last week's fact check. I'm going to go back up to the
Jaime's next.
Jaime's next. Great Scott, Jaime's next.
Wait, no.
Oh, no, wait, I'm next. Sorry, I've skipped the page. I did to myself. Okay. Great Scott! We got news this week that Christopher Lloyd, the beloved actor behind Dr. Emmett Brown for Back to the Future, is going to be on season 3 of The Mandalorian. Hollywood Reporter has an exclusive story from earlier this week. Of course, it's been picked up and aggregated everywhere else that he is currently filming the 3rd season of the show in Southern California. No details.
He's going somewhere where there are no roads?
There are no, well, if it's on Tatooine, then there's train tracks apparently, but no roads. It does not say anything about who he's playing, what he's going to be doing. It lists absolutely no information in there, but yeah, interesting nonetheless.
Okay.
He's in his 80s now, so good for him to keep working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he doesn't do a lot of work in front of the camera nowadays, which is why seeing him in stuff like Nobody with Odenkirk is a pleasure. Yeah. He's usually more like, executive producer or producer, writer, you see his credits. So having him in front of the camera they must have chosen something pretty interesting for him to decide to do that.
And it says he was in The Tender Bar. Tim, you said you watched that, right?
I did, yeah. But I do remember him being, sort of the ornery, older, dad kind of guy, uncle kind of guy. But like the portrayal in Nobody. Have you seen Nobody, John?
No, that's on my to-do list.
Yeah, no, he plays a really old guy, like octogenarian type thing. So yeah, I see why Jaime was kind of like questioning the role, right? So
no, I mean, not questioning his ability, just to be really clear, just questioning, like, it seemed like he had very clearly chosen, like, I'm going to predominantly do producing and writing, different kind of work lifestyle than being an actor in front of the camera. So I'm going to assume that him coming back in front of the camera again is because he really likes whatever the role was.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I could see him in a Star Wars thing for sure.
This is also quite the, he's now completed quite the trifecta here, because of course he was Commander Krug in Star Trek 3, Search for Spock, the famously, the one who ends up killing Kirk's son, and really being a general, one of the reasons why Kirk hates Klingons so much. So he's going to have the Star Wars, Star Trek, Back to the Future trilogy of experiences. I mean, he was already a legend for Back to the Future, but man, that's quite the trifecta to complete.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you've got that great scene where the Enterprise crew has set the auto destruct and gotten off the ship, and the Klingons are on board, and they're like, "Hey, Captain,
nothing's here but us." Yeah,
it's just a computer talking. 7, 6, 5. So get out of there!
What are you, stupid?
Yeah, for sure. All right,
and now give me Jaime's turn.
Yeah, great Scott, it's Jaime's turn.
Yeah, I don't have a cool quote for this, but in the Netflix is throwing a lot of animated properties at the wall and seeing what sticks, kind of thing. To no one's surprise, they're doing a Tekken anime series. This is based on the Tekken video game fighting series. If you've watched Castlevania, a video game animated series on Netflix, I have not seen the League of Legends one, or Arcane, I want to say it's called, or Legacy or something like that. People have been saying that's pretty good, even for people who aren't fans. I'm maybe going to check that one out.
I've heard the same thing, yeah.
So who knows where this one will go in terms of things, but it does seem kind of cool to see this turned into Japanese anime style thing. I think it's produced in America, though. I don't know if they said. But hey, it's coming out on Netflix.
Cool. Yeah, were you a Tekken fan, Jaime?
Yeah, there's so many games. Probably more familiar with the first 3, maybe 4. 4,
maybe, yeah.
I feel like
so
5
you know how to play beach volleyball, you know how to play bowling, all the good stuff.
Yeah. Is it spoilers to say, man, I really hope they have like the kangaroos and
the pandas,
the little dinosaur guys. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, Gone has to be in it.
It gets weird, Tim. It gets real weird.
It's a weird franchise that kind of expanded in all kinds of odd directions, but I'll tell you, of all the fighting games I played over the years and sort of, play with my friends and play by myself, Tekken was by far my favorite. I thought it did a pretty good job in a very limited scope. Like, they really only showed you a little vignette at the beginning, and they showed you a little vignette of each of the characters sort of explaining their motivations, wordless ones at that. And yet it felt like a world that was rife for some storytelling. Like, they were all pretty compelling little bits, and the animation was, for its time, super, super well done. So I'll definitely keep my eyes peeled on this one and sort of see if this is something half decent.
Yeah, I do remember the giant pandas. They were huge, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's always the funniest is when you could, like, overlap the weirdness, where you could have them do, like, the 10-pin bowling game that was built in.
Oh, really?
Or the beach volleyball game that was built into one of them.
I only played the one-on-one fighting stuff.
Yeah.
Each one had a special ability or something. Right?
Well, then there was Tekken Tag, which was fun too, where you had to pick 2 guys, and then you could tag in and tag out as they were getting beat up. That was kind of fun.
Right. Cool. Mm-hmm. I remember getting beat up a lot in those games.
Yeah. That's what they're there for. It's for guys who cannot punch each other in real life to get out their frustrations and play a game. All right. Next up, The Flash. Got news this week that The Flash is coming back for season 9. CW has handed out a few early renewals for some of its series. The Flash is getting a season 9. Superman and Lois is getting a season 3. Riverdale is getting a season 7, for those of you who are interested in that. And also a few more. All Americans getting a season 5. Kung Fu's getting a season 3. Nancy Drew's getting a season 4. And last but not least, Walker, the Walker Texas Ranger remake, is getting a season 3. So interesting that those ones got the early nod. No word yet about Legends of Tomorrow or Batwoman or Naomi, the newest comer to the DC comic book universe on CW. So yeah, I guess we'll see how that all plays out over the course of time. I'm kind of conflicted. On one hand, I have a very big fondness for The Flash. It was one of the series that I really gravitated to, but since they've changed over like 90% of the cast from the beginning now, and the same thing even with Legends, they've changed so much that it's not even hardly much of the show that it once was. So I would have probably been okay if they were going to wrap up this year. I'm fine with there being a season 9. I will probably eventually watch it, but I don't know. How do you guys feel about there being more of the DC CW stuff? Do you still care?
Don't know. So the same actor plays the Flash, but all the surrounding people have changed over?
Yeah, there's 3 characters that remain. It's Flash and the young woman who plays his wife and his dad. That's pretty much it. And even the dad has sort of been reduced at times to sort of
he rescued his dad, I guess, from...
Or not his dad, his stepfather, his stepdad, who's the police chief. So... yeah, outside of that, like all the supporting cast has sort of come and gone in different iterations, some for different reasons to do work, other projects, some short term and back and forth. But yeah, they've sort of pulled people in and out, and they've replaced, the supporting characters. So again, it hasn't dramatically lost its tone. It's just obviously you build up a relationship with those characters too. And I think it's a sad truth for anyone who's watched a lot of that show to reconcile the fact that Barry might be the worst character on his own show. Am I wrong?
No. I'm not a huge watcher of the Flash. So from the DC stuff on CW, I was predominantly a Supergirl watcher, and I would see the other shows when they did the crossovers with Arrow, Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow. I watched the first season of Batwoman and then punted when they changed out the character.
Yep.
So for me, on list of things, I've been continuing to watch Superman and Lois, and I've been watching Kung Fu. But Flash is just kind of there. I guess at this point, it's kind of like comfortingly there, of like, oh, I might just have it on in the background kind of thing. So I've probably seen certainly a handful of episodes in random order just because it's there all the time, sort of thing.
Yeah, Superman and Lois is kind of. I have been watching. I've been PVRing it, but I kind of find it weak in a sense, right? Maybe it's very comic-y. I don't know. It's not as entertaining as other of these, especially the Marvel properties, right? But yeah, I think it needs work. It's not as good as was it Lois and Clark?
Yeah, Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher.
That was a really good series, yeah. But this one isn't quite that. I mean, even though there's 10, 15 years difference between them, right?
Oh, yeah, maybe more than that, yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I don't know. What do you think, Jaime? The whole high school drama thing and the Smallville, and does that work for you?
I think it's kind of interesting in that it's 3 different shows in one, and I feel more strongly about one of the shows. And then I'm pretty good on the second part, and then I'm not a huge fan of the third part. So it's kind of like Cobra Kai, in that for Cobra Kai, I love the original 80s actors related stuff, basically all the adults. And I'm not super keen on the teen drama part, except for where it interacts with the adults, right? It's like adults dealing with these dumb kids. Superman and Lois has the same kind of thing. I really, really personally like the what if Superman but has to deal with his dang kids sort of thing, right? This is 35 to 40-year-old Superman, I can't handle my life kind of thing. Like, how am I going to punch Doomsday in the face and worry about my teen son drinking and driving, right? Like, it's that sort of thing. Like, that's kind of fun. I do like the superhero part of the show. The Superman doing Superman stuff. That's, kind of the second part. The third part of the show I don't like is when it's just the teenagers. I'm like, yeah, I really don't care about these normal people with their petty problems of don't bother Clark, man. He's trying to be like the assistant coach here, and he's also got to go punch Doomsday in the face, right? Like that's something that I think I struggle with. So it's not a fully complete show. It's not a must see for me, but it is one that I continue to watch.
Yeah, I think that's the trouble is for a bit of, it's maybe not spoilers for Jonathan, but one of the sons exhibits powers, right?
I'm shocked. Shocked, I say. I'm shocked.
So it's trying to, it's kind of like the Teen Wolf kind of, how do I deal with this? But it's not Teen Wolf 1, it's Teen Wolf 2, right? How do I deal with this rage that I deal with? Because he's got the teenage angst and the testosterone, and he's got the superpowers he's trying to learn how to deal with, right? And yeah, so it's a bit tiring.
I think it's not helped by the fact that it has the weakest writing for Lois Lane that I've ever seen, and even my significant other picked up on this because usually she's doing something in the background, and then I'm watching the show. And she noticed after several weeks, she's like, why is the woman character always irrational and unreasonable? And I said, what do you mean? And she described some of the things. I'm like, yeah, that's why I don't like the Lois Lane character in this iteration, because she's I didn't look at the writers to see if it's all dudes or something, but it's certainly written from a very male perspective, where she is just completely unreasonable as a character to add extra drama.
And she's supposed to be one of the stronger characters in the relationship too, because she's the reporter, and she's the big city reporter working in a small newspaper or whatever, right? Sort of she's kind of slumming it as a professional working woman, right? But she's got to, like you said, she's got to drive the kids to the hockey game and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think they gave her the Star Trek Bad Admiral role for this show, where again, it's kind of like, Superman's doing stuff, and then he gets called by the Superman watch signal beeper thing, and he's like, okay, Lois, what's going on? Clark, did you know your son was going to have sex with this girl? I'm like, are you serious? This is what you're bothering Superman about? Ignore the fact that bothering your husband about this is one thing, but I was just saving people from drowning because the dam burst. Could you like slow your roll and not push this emergency button to call me over for this? Like, why couldn't this have waited till I came home for dinner? You know? So it's a show with weaknesses. I like seeing, you know, Clark Kent and Superman deal with what if Superman, but also has the baggage of a family kind of aspect that I haven't really seen a lot. But it does have some flaws. I'm not saying it's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad I can rest easy skipping episodes then, I guess. All right.
They do a pretty decent job of doing recaps, so you probably could skip an episode or two and be like, oh, okay, whatever. Like,
oh no, they're on my PVR. I haven't gotten around to erasing them, but I just and I can also watch them on something like some streaming service has them all backed up or whatever, right? I could watch them there now. Right?
Yeah, and they're on the on demand too. So yeah.
Yep.
All right. And our last story for this week for news is that Suicide Squad: killed the Justice League, which is a very cool looking game that I think Jaime and I both mentioned in previous episodes. We got news this week. It's going to be delayed till next year, which is a bit of a drag, although I tend to take gaming release dates with a grain of salt after both working in the industry and also being a gamer for so long. I don't believe that a game is released until a game is released. So when they say, oh, we've got to go back to the drawing board, we're going to delay it because we want to make it even better. Whatever. That's fine. No game is released until I have it in my hands. So I'm not surprised. It does look really excellent. The trailer that they put out like a year and a half ago looks really great. Harley Quinn and Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and they're all, it's kind of got a little bit of an overlap with what's going on with the Suicide Squad movie they did. The idea is that basically the Justice League have been taken over and they have to stop them, this sort of ragtag bunch. But it looks super fun and the graphics look great, so I'm looking forward to it. But it's gonna be a little longer wait.
Yeah. So by the way, just as a sidebar, have you guys seen Everything Everywhere? Because a couple of people I follow online were saying it's an amazing show and they loved it.
Nope.
The Michelle Yeoh one?
No, because it came out in theaters only, right? It's not on a streaming service.
I thought it was a movie. It's not. I thought it was a TV show, like a series.
It is? I thought it was a movie.
Is it a movie? Oh, okay.
I thought it was a movie, but I'm not sure.
Okay, maybe it's a movie. All right. Anyway, we'll just check that in our. Anyway, that part of the show where we talk about something Star Trek related this week. We've only got one Star Trek thing to talk about. Only one? And it's Star Trek Picard, Season 2, Episode 4. Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. And it's called The Watcher, or Watcher. Not The Watcher, just Watcher.
Not to be confused with The Watcher. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure Marvel would be upset if they called it The Watcher.
Oh, I guess, yeah.
All right. Well, we kicked the episode off back at the very dark and rather depressing-looking Chateau Picard. We scan over the top of it and see that it's in ruins. So that confirms what we suspected last week, that is in fact where Picard had them crash land, knowing that it was abandoned at this point in history.
Did he know it was abandoned, or did we know it was abandoned?
We didn't know that. We surmised, I think, on last week's episode that's where Picard had taken them to crash. He said, "I'm taking you home," but we didn't actually see that it was at Chateau Picard. This week they start with this sort of panoramic flyover where we see that it is in a pretty nasty state of disrepair,
and it's in a backwood sort of
it's out in the French countryside.
First thing I thought about last week, and I'm sure you'll get to it, is like, how come nobody sees it there?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is supposed to be that it's in the middle of the French countryside, right? So we get a little flyover there and a little sort of establishing from where Picard and Agnes are. Then we go straight over to Seven and Raffi, who open the door at the clinic. And of course, we saw at the end of last week's episode, Rios and Teresa were taken off in handcuffs by ICE agents. And so Seven and Raffi track them down there. They're told, nope, your friend was here. He was busted by ICE, so they go off to look for him. Back to the ship, Agnes is sort of shivering and cold, and Picard says, we should get you near to a fire. I know where we can find one of those, and let me just crank on the old cloaking device here. So we find out that the ship has a cloaking device, which is an interesting.
How convenient.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense though, right? Because it wasn't like the Federation couldn't develop the technology because they were just too dumb to put rocks together. It was because they had a treaty with the Romulans that prevented them, whereas the Confederation is like, it's all human all the time. We don't care about your ideas of morality or negotiation sort of thing. So of course they would have cloaking devices. It sort of made sense to me. It is a plot convenience of like, oh, let's hide the ship. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see how you got there though.
Yeah. So they head over to the old chateau, and Picard gives a little backstory, basically explaining that at this point in history, in 2024, that the chateau had been abandoned for 100 years, that it had been previously used as a Nazi headquarters, and that the people that were there when the Nazis came in survived only by being in the underground tunnels. I wonder if underground tunnels will come back around at some point, but the math didn't quite add up on that one. It was abandoned for 100 years. Why were there people there when the Nazis were there in the 1930s? But anyways, I digress.
Wait, is that when he said the 100 years? I thought it was 100 years from when they had to escape from the Nazis. That's the way I interpret it.
Oh, I see. So
like
they were
forward,
so it was abandoned for 100 years from when the Nazis came?
That's how I understood it with the underground tunnels thing. And also, did you catch the canonical fix for why does this very British man have a
because the Picards, they escaped France and moved to England.
Yeah, and then for 100 years they localized, right?
Yep. So hence the English accents. Yeah, convenient. Or maybe they just hired an English guy to play a Frenchman. So we get a little bit of a flashback where Picard is sort of looking down the hallways and he sees his mom. We get another little sort of...
it's a flash forward flashback.
Well, yeah, so as a flash to the future, but back in his timeline. Anyways. So we get a little bit more of the relationship between him and his mom, which is interesting. And that sort of continues to unfurl itself.
Explains the Edith Piaf he's always listening to as well.
Mm-hmm. And then we get this sort of weird sequence where Agnes is sort of walking around the room. Instead of sitting by the fire where she's supposed to be, she's walking around the room with a blanket draped around her. Strange the blanket survived all this time, unless they brought that from the ship. But she ends up pulling this book off the shelf, and then she runs over and grabs a bottle of wine, and she starts playing with this abacus that's over on the wall. And not coincidentally, Picard figures out that she keeps... being drawn to the number 15 based on the information she pulled out of the Borg Queen's noggin. And so she grabs the 15th volume of the encyclopedia, she grabs a 1915 wine, and she just offhandedly moves the abacus to 15. And they figure out that it's April the 12th, and it's the 15th that is the 15 there, and that means they only have 3 days left to change the future before the future they saw, the brutal future that they came from, it comes to pass. We go back to Seven and Raffi. They are taking a bus to try and get to LAPD headquarters. Back of the bus, we have a punk. The punk is playing a song that sounds a little familiar. He's banging along to his portable radio, and a clear homage to the 1986 scene from Star Trek: The Voyage Home. And I looked it up, and it is the exact same actor. So wow, cool. Bravo to them for pulling the obscure Kirk R. Thatcher back to play this punk. And of course, this time they turn the tables, showing that even rough and rumble punks can learn over the course of time. Between 1986 and 2024, apparently this punk has learned that if he's blasting his music on the bus, he has to turn it down, otherwise he's going to get thumped.
Yep. Yeah. And he apologized.
And he does. Not only does he turn it down, he just says, "I love that song, man. Worth it. Good gag."
Great gag. I thought it was. Yeah,
it's a deep cut.
Kind of one. I was gonna go and look and see if it was the same guy or whatever. But yeah, thanks for doing that.
There you go.
Same song. I mean,
it was not exactly the same song, but it's very much the same sentiment in the song. So
yeah.
Okay, so then yes, they are sort of both PO'd, and they're on their way to go and try and find Rios, heading to the wrong place. We'll find out. But we go back to Picard and Agnes. Picard basically says, you know what, we're going to need to split up. I'm going to go and try and find this Watcher. Agnes, you stay here by yourself with the Queen, who you just networked with last week. What could possibly go wrong? Exactly. And so Picard gets beamed out, and Agnes is left alone with the Queen, and the Queen sort of, makes this allusion to the fact that, now the two of them share this bond, this connection, and, the hive of two.
You've had the taste, now
That's
you've
right.
had the taste.
Well, we know Agnes is an addictive personality, so it's interesting. Of course, Picard beams out, and he drops himself at an intersection, and he turns around, and he finds himself at a very familiar intersection, where he finds himself at number 10 Forward Avenue. For, of course, 10 Forward, where we saw in episode 1, he met with an older version of Guinan. That's Guinan's Earth-based bar. And so he wanders in and sits down and says hello, and meets a young Guinan, which was kind of an interesting twist. I don't know that I saw that one coming, although it probably was telegraphed pretty well. And of course, she's got her beautiful pit bull, Luna, who I believe was actually played by Patrick Stewart's dog, if I'm not mistaken. That looked an awful lot.
Number 1, right?
An awful lot like his dog, yeah. And she's very suspicious. She's like, who the hell are you? What do you want? Like, I'm closing, I'm leaving, I'm done. This place is, beyond me. And Picard is trying to be very coy. He's not telling her who he is. He's sort of, I'm here on an important mission, and then drops the fact that, he knows that she's an Elorian, and she's not pleased. We go back to Seven and Raffi. They arrive at LAPD headquarters. They're trying to find Rios, and they are, bawling out. Raffi's bawling out the desk sergeant, trying to figure out, where is our friend? Where has he gone? Whatever. They get a tip from one of the people sitting there. You know what? If you're looking for somebody who was detained by ICE, you're not going to find them with LAPD. They've got their own thing. Try going here. Then we cut to Rios, who is in the ICE detention cell, and he is watching just some of the cruelty that happens inside these facilities, where they basically are bullying people to get back on a bus and be deported to Mexico, whether or not they want to, or whether or not they are in violation of their rights or anything else. Same kind of stuff that I'm sure happens regularly down there. And then he sort of intercedes on behalf of this young man and ends up getting tasered, right? Yep. So then we go to Picard and Guinan. Guinan's clearly getting ready to leave. She is giving Luna, her dog, away to one of her friends, and Picard sort of goes, well, let's try something different here. And so he repeats back the exact words that Guinan says to him in the same place 400 years in the future, and Guinan leans over the bar and pukes because she feels at Kelt, the time sickness, because she heard the exact same words, and she knows that there is that connection. That's a strange one. That's an interesting new concept. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that you could make an Elorian puke just by saying something to them that they said to you previously.
Well, it's similar to how the Borg Queen could sense a weirdness. In the second episode, she could sense that was weird things going on in the timeline.
Yeah, yeah.
I also viewed it as potentially being it's not like a retcon per se, but more of a fill-in for how she knew that the timeline was wrong in yesterday's Enterprise.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
because presumably in that timeline, she's been living her life normally, totally fine, until they hit that inflection point of whoa, wait a minute. Actually, Picard, this timeline is wrong. I don't know why it's wrong, but it's definitely wrong. Right. So maybe that's what they're going for in this throw-up thing.
Yeah. We move back over to Seven and Raffi. This episode jumps around a lot. We move over to Seven and Raffi, and they are trying to figure out how they're going to find Rios. Raffi says, well, you know what? I'm thinking we just pop into one of these little police cars here, and we borrow their computer. And so she phasers out a window, and Seven says, weren't we supposed to not have phasers? And then she's like, I don't know how that got in my pocket. And then she sits down, and she's like, well, now how are you going to use the computer? You know how to use the computer? She pulls out a tricorder order, which apparently Raffi was not messing around on this mission. She broke all her own rules. In the end, they have to steal the police car basically to try and get where they're going. So they start driving towards where Rios is. Seven is behind the wheel. How she learned how to drive, I'm not sure, but she doesn't do it well. She starts weaving through traffic, driving down the wrong one-way streets the wrong way, generally putting their lives in danger. In LA, the odds of her survival would be astronomically high, having spent a little time there. But for humorous effect, she lives.
Let me interject here with something that came to my mind. So I have sort of two explanations for Seven knowing how to drive things. So sort of the broader cheat one is like, oh, well, in a world where you have holodecks, why couldn't you do something like, oh, I'm going to be, racing against Mario Andretti or something, right? Like, sure. Why not? Sure. Knock yourself out. But more concretely for Seven herself, I'd have a harder time doing this with Raffi, is Seven's crewmate for 4 years was Mr. Tom Paris, who was really into cars.
True.
If you remember, he knew what the floating Chevy pickup truck or Ford pickup truck was when everybody else was confused what it was, the one that they found in space. So not unreasonable that she would have learned from Tom Paris himself about how to drive.
Also, she had all the knowledge of the Borg Collective in her head too, right?
There's that one, oh yes, that's right. So we assimilated some people who were really into cars and therefore their knowledge and along with their knowledge of all the Pokemon is in the Borg Collective's consciousness, right?
Yeah. They don't know it all, but they know a lot. Back to Jurati and the Queen. They are playing a little sort of chess game as they're sort of trying to figure out how they can which one of them is basically going to have the upper hand in their dynamic. Quick scene goes back to Picard and Guinan, and he is trying to sort of give her the reason why she should stick around and why she should believe what it is he has to say. It's at that point that she starts to really sort of dig her heels in. She's I'm not sticking around. Humanity's a waste. We get a little bit more of a glimpse of the DS9 future that we saw, the 21st century, where things are starting to look pretty rough in California and things are getting bad. We go to the ICE detainment center with Rios and Teresa, and they are talking about, he's like, she says, well, why'd you come back? And he's like, well, I left, but I came back. I wanted to make sure that things were okay. And, he doesn't admit that what he really went back for is his communicator, which he still didn't get. And then she gets released. And he is stuck there. And the same jackass ICE officer that had tasered him earlier sort of says, we're going to put you on a bus and send you, down to Mexico unless you can give us a good reason not to. Tell us who you are. Show us your proof of identification, citizenship. And Rios just lays it all out for him and basically says, my name is Cristobal Rios. I am the captain of the USS Stargazer. I come from the year 2400. I need to get, we're here. We're looking for a watcher so we can reset the timeline. And the guy sort of rolls his eyes and walks out of the room. But, sometimes truth, it's best plan. Seven and Raffi are weaving their way through traffic. We get the great line from Seven. What does the yellow one mean? Speed up. Which is, I think the same philosophy that my son has, but I'm not sure.
And red means stop. Yep.
Yeah, and red means stop. At that point, Rios is being ferried outside. He's being stuck on the bus. We've got Raffi and Seven are trying to communicate with Agnes, and they're saying, hey, you need to help us here. You need to transport us there. Otherwise, we have no chance of getting there in time, and we're going to lose Rios. So they basically have him have Jurati sort of realizes she can't get the transporters back online alone. So she goes to the Borg Queen and says, let's make a deal. And the Queen basically says, well, what could you possibly offer me that I would want? And she's like, me, you want somebody to talk to. You're desperately lonely. And if you help me, if you get the transporters back online, I will stay here and I will talk with you. which is a very astute move from Agnes, right? Like, we know that she's a very smart person in spite of all of her vices, that she observes that the Queen is really desperately lonely, having been disconnected from the hive, right? So then we get the repairs. Agnes has Seven and Raffi basically slam the brakes on in their car, and then they are beamed out. Apparently they had to slam on the brakes because the transporters were having a tough time getting a lock on moving targets. Probably for the best, because if they just beamed them out while the car was going super fast, that would have been really messy. Although having them be beamed out right in plain sight of a bunch of armed officers, also maybe not the best thing for the timeline, but what are you going to do? They find themselves on a hilltop, and the question becomes, this bus is coming careening down the hill. How the hell are they going to stop the bus? To be continued. The Queen, we go back to Agnes and the Queen, and Agnes basically sort of, having gotten the transporters online and completed that part of the mission, then walks out of the room, and the Queen is understandably miffed, saying like, no, you said you'd stick around. What are you doing? Where are you going? Back to Picard and Guinan, and and Guinan's very unlikable. She's really being quite unpleasant. She's not listening. She's not compromising. I really feel like we need more context as to why she's being so hostile, because this is a character who we've known for 20 plus years. To have her be so obstinate, and she's a listener by nature. Why isn't she listening to him? I found that very incongruous to what we know about the character. And I'm not even going to get too far into the fact that she now looks younger than she did back in the 1800s when they first met, but we'll get to that in a second. So Picard sort of says, okay, you know what? I gotta up the ante here. So he reveals what his name is and what he's there for. And Guinan sort of goes, oh my gosh. Okay. So chronologically for her, she would have known that they met in the past when they had the adventure with Mark Twain and Data in the past, right? She should have, even in that moment, she should have A, recognized him, but B, being reminded, because sure, it's been 130 years or 150 years since they last met, which for her is a drop in the bucket, but still, shouldn't she have recognized him and or his name immediately and been like, oh, cool, we've met before, I trust you, let's figure this out. But no, she's still being kind of unlikable about all this.
Well, you're touching an area where timey-wimey gets involved, because if you follow the timeline and its consequences, if the Confederation is the future from the starting point of where they're at, there is no data that's recovered, which means data doesn't go back in time, and they don't have those shenanigans, which means Picard and company don't go back in time. There is no Data's head back in the 1800s, right? So,
but if they've gone back in time prior to the point of the divergence, wouldn't that be that previous time? Or this is where timey-wimey starts to make your brain hurt.
Yeah, it ends up being kind of like the end of All Good Things, All Good Things, the end of TNG, where it's like all of these three different timelines should hypothetically be together, but they're disconnected because of, in this case, Q-based timey-wiminess. So I don't know that they did a good job of explaining. Like, I wish they had a throwaway line of like, don't you remember the 1800s? Oh, wait, if we never had the Federation, Data never goes back, we never have that conversation. I wish they had spent just like 10 seconds filling in this part, because I think there's a rational reason here, but you got to just say timey-wiminess, the timeline is looped, and so if you change that part of it, this other part has changed too, which means it ends up being like the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure kind of thing, right?
Wow. Like, all right. If you're going to get too far into the weeds, then the moment of conception that creates all these characters doesn't exist. And anyways, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, it gets weird.
Okay, so we wrap it up with so Guinan, now knowing who he is and hearing his name, realizes, okay, there's something about his name that I need to deal with. So she takes him to go meet this supervisor, and the supervisor, who's this quote guardian angel type, is the person who's going to sort of help. And so this sort of creepy kid comes up to them in the park and talks to the two of them and basically says to Guinan, like, get lost. Guinan says, peace, I'm out. And then the kid leads Picard to one spot where this sort of consciousness keeps transferring from person to person, sort of possessing them and guiding Picard to this inevitable person. And at one point sort of says, take your battery out of your communicator because I don't want you doing anything shady here. And by the time they get to this, sort of through this maze of people to the other side, of course, Picard sort of sees somebody and says, excuse me, don't I know you? And turns around and it's Laris, who, of course, we know from last season and this season as the Romulan woman who lived within his house, who he almost kissed in the first episode. And she walks over and says hello, and then this sort of misty, vanishing magic door appears.
TARDIS, yes.
Yeah, and sort of the two of them sort of disappear inside. And then we get this sort of weird sort of little coda here at the end here where Q is sort of sitting at a cafe wearing a Europa mission uniform, which is weird, and is talking to himself, and he tries to sort of snap himself somewhere and it doesn't work. So I'm not sure what we're supposed to take out of that. Maybe you guys have some thoughts.
Well, he was trying to tell the woman what she was thinking and where she was, what she was doing as he was saying this, to sort of, that sort of third person narrative that he does. And then, yeah, it seems like maybe the messing up of the timeline has also messed up his ability or broken the continuum.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Jaime, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with Q and why his Infinity Gauntlet is broken, but people, I don't know if this is considered a spoiler for future stuff or if I just flat out missed this in the credits. That people were saying online that some resources saying the girl is Renee Picard, who was mentioned as the person who was instrumental in early exploration.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I was supposed to know that there, or if we're going to be shocked in the next episode. And this is technically a spoiler. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's where we wrap up. We wrap up with Q snapping and saying, "Well, that's not good." What are your overall impressions? Any thoughts on this one?
I like this episode. I thought it was interesting. Like lots of interesting little twists and turns to sort of figure things out. And the car driving was fun in the sense, right? Funny to see how they dealt with that, and especially the part where Girardi says something annoying, and they both go. She says, "You guys need to get together. You work on your communication," and she starts spewing on, and they both go Girardi at the same time, and she goes, "Yeah, see, it's already working. You're already synced up."
Yeah, she's great. I mean, I really like Alison Pill. I think she's very funny, a very talented actor. I've enjoyed her in a couple other things. It's fun to see her. She has this
Canada's own.
She is Canada's own. She has this lovely sort of little half smile, sort of twinkle in her eye. She has very mischievous eyes, those big dark eyes, and she's great. I like her.
Yeah, so Madeline Wise plays Yvette Picard.
Mm-hmm.
So who's Yvette? His mother?
That's his mom, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote some...
Oh, no, sorry, that's Yvette Picard. No, that's not the same person. Just the blonde hair threw me off. Let me see if I can figure out who she is. Because they have the cast listed for the episode. Small girl plays the girl with the white eyes. Young Picard. It says Soong here. I didn't see any Soong anywhere, did you?
Unless they were hiding in plain sight. I didn't...
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't see that myself. I've got some questions here that I wrote in my notes. So we already talked about Tom Paris and Seven learning to drive. Guinan looking different, given that we know that she looks like Whoopi Goldberg in the 1800s, at least in the original timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Do El-Orians shed their skin, perhaps?
Well, they mentioned in the first episode of this season, where Guinan looks like Whoopi Goldberg now, obviously, and Picard says, oh, you're looking a little older, and she says, basically we can choose what we look like, right? So I get the impression that she can age and or de-age herself at will. That was the impression I was left with.
Yeah.
That their outward appearance really is a matter of choice.
Okay, I could buy that. That's a good callback. The other thing I have in my notes here is are they setting up Rios and the Doctor? I don't know how to put this here, so I just put it the way I wrote in my notes. Is this a Stephen J. Fry style Nasty and the Pasty situation that they're setting up, where he's not going to be exactly his own grandfather, but like, you know, a few hundred years separated worth? Like, why are they setting that up? Where do you think they're going with Rios and the Doctor? That seems somewhat more romantic. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of possibilities based on Star Trek storytelling, timey-wimey stuff that they've done. One of the possibilities is, yes, that there's some sort of, you know, relation or whatever, although I think they've been pretty overt with the sort of flirtation between the two of them, so that would be a little gross if she was like his great-great-great-great-great-grandmother or something like that. The other possibility is it's one of those like she has to die for the future to live kind of deals, where it's like, you know, her survival means the death of humanity. She has to die so that everybody else can live kind of deal, because they've certainly done that in the past. I don't know. It's hard to say. Or, you know, again, this was the last we see of her, because she sort of says, you know, if you need anything, you know, call me or whatever. And then she's like, peace out, homie. I'm out of here. So whether or not that's the last we see of her, I don't know. Any thoughts on any of that?
I mean, it certainly seems plausible. So you're talking a city on the edge of, man, what's the one thing? City on the edge of forever for tomorrow. What's the Guardian?
Oh yeah, the one they just referenced, the one with Joan Collins, right?
So you're saying that, like, basically McCoy's sacrifice,
City on the edge of forever, right?
Thank you. McCoy's sacrifice is something they might be going for here as a thing with the Doctor.
Yeah, like maybe that's all interrelated, or maybe it's her son, or you know what I mean? Like, who knows how this all sort of comes together. It seems like a weird resolution to their dynamic to have her just be like, okay, I'm free now. You have a nice trip back to Mexico. I don't know. It's hard to say. It seems like 4 episodes out of 10 in, we're pretty new into this. There's still not a lot of stuff to cling on to yet. Pardon the pun.
Cling on? Yeah. Anyway, so I was just checking some of the trivia on the show, but nothing really significant other than the dog is one of Picard's rescues. Apparently, or Patrick Stewart's rescues. Apparently, he and his wife rescue pit bulls.
Yeah. No, it had to be. There was no other reason other for him to go, look, pit bulls are good. You should adopt one.
Yeah, exactly.
So to be continued next week. I guess we'll see if by our next week we'll hit the halfway point on season 2, and maybe things will start to get a little clearer.
I think it'll be a good when you can binge all the episodes one after the other. I think it'll be a bit more enjoyable, you know.
Yeah, it really does. This is one of those cases for the argument between the sort of episode dump model versus the week by week model. I mean, we talked about some of the sort of cliffhangers. Obviously, we had the cliffhanger where, in the episode previous where, they were held at gunpoint. Last week was, Rios getting arrested. This week it's how do they get Rios off the bus? And also, how is Laris in this time and what's going on with her? Any speculation on the Laris stuff? Are we supposed to assume that she's been traveling throughout time protecting the Picard line so that Picard can fulfill his spatial destiny or something?
Good question.
That's a possibility. In my notes, I wrote Laris is a fembot baby as a she's been a golem too, or the Watcher is aware of enough things to be like, I'm just going to mess with your head by putting someone you love as the face.
Yeah, and it's possible that that's the case. It's not actually Laris. It's just using a familiar face. But my thought was, because what convinces Guinan that she needs to take action is the name Picard, right? That's the thing that triggers her is, oh, I know the name Picard. And I know that that's important. And that's what triggers her to finally take action after an entire episode of saying, no, go away. When he finally says, my name is Picard, she's like, well, we better get you over to this person then. So to me, what that says is, and clearly, obviously with all the foreshadowing they've done with the Chateau Picard, the relationship with his mom, Q, all that stuff, I saw that as potentially, Picard is one of those people throughout history. The family line is important and therefore needs to be protected throughout history so that Picard can be born, so that Picard can do whatever, whether it's stop the Borg or meet the Q or win a game of Domjot. I don't know.
Right.
Get stabbed in the heart. Hey, I was thinking about that when we were talking about him suddenly having this robotic body that is equally frail to the body he had previously, which again, dick move. But so I guess he doesn't have a hole in his heart now. That's a bonus.
No hole in his heart, you mean?
But yeah, like he it's all robotic now. Before he had a robotic heart for a while there. Now he's got robotic everything.
True.
Yeah, Rios sort of casually blew past that with and this guy, he's like a flesh and blood robot. I don't even understand what that means, you know.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. All right, let's move to the watch list. What you got?
Watch list. Yep, I had some time this week, so I powered through a couple of series on Netflix, which I enjoyed. So I watched Human Resources. We talked about this one in previous episodes. This is the spin-off from Big Mouth, one of my favorite shows on Netflix. Human Resources focuses on the place where all the monsters that visit the kids in Big Mouth live and work, and about sort of their dynamic. So they make a joke in the very first part of the very first scene of the very first episode, so there's not really a spoiler, but they basically say, you know, it's The Office meets Big Mouth. That's essentially what it is. It's sort of a workplace comedy within that same parameters that you already know if you've watched Big Mouth. It took a little bit. It took me a couple episodes to sort of get into the swing of it. They introduced a few new characters with some good voice cast. Aidy Bryant plays the star. Aidy Bryant, of course, from Saturday Night Live and Shrill, for those of you who've seen that show. And what's his name? Randall Park. Randall Park, who of course he was on WandaVision. He was on Fresh Off the Boat for years and years and years. He's a great actor. Always Be My Maybe, I think, is the movie that was on Netflix with Ali Wong that he was in, who's also really good in. So they added a few new characters. They brought back some characters, you know. So of course, you know, some of the hormone monsters and the shame wizard and you know, depression kitty and all these characters that you're familiar with if you've watched Big Mouth. And it's good. It took me a couple episodes to get into it. There's just sort of figuring out the dynamics and the characters, and you know, there are a couple cameos in the season with characters that you're familiar with from Big Mouth that really kind of does its own thing, and they introduce some new human characters they interact with. And just like Big Mouth, it's both ridiculously vulgar and over the top, and also at times extremely sweet and poignant and quite lovely and human. They really are a very, very talented writing crew and cast to both show you these absolute moments of ridiculous absurdity, and also, you know, there are times where it's really quite beautiful and touching. So again, huge shout out to them for the range that they can put into the show. But it's 10 episodes. The episodes are, you know, whatever, 25 minutes a piece. It's a pretty breezy little watch. Definitely something you can just sort of chuck on. And lots and lots of funny gags, lots and lots of just silly, stupid, over-the-top stuff that you can really enjoy. So yeah, definitely, if you like Big Mouth at all, or you're just looking for a laugh, definitely check out Human Resources. The other show I watched was Disenchantment. So part 4 or season 4 of Disenchantment dropped as well on Netflix recently. This series I like a lot. I like the characters. I like Abby Jacobson. I like Eric Andre. I like the cast. I like the writing. I like that it's just a notch further into the adult beyond Futurama. It's like it's a little more sort of just a little slightly bit edgier than that, a little more drinking, drugs, you know, sex humor, stuff like that. It's certainly not Big Mouth or Human Resources, but it's a little bit further along on the spectrum. And this season really, like, this series is funny. We talk about Star Trek. We talk about how Star Trek, some of the best Star Trek is episodic. Some of the best Star Trek is continuous, telling one long narrative story over the course of the season. This is the 4th part. So this would be episodes 31 through 40 of this series. If you haven't watched from the beginning, you're lost. And if you have watched from the beginning, you're still going to find yourself at times being like, oh, that's a reference to this thing from season 3, but it's also a reference to this thing from season 2, but it's also a reference to this thing from season 1. Like, they are telling one long continuous story, and they don't give you catch-ups. They don't give you a previously on. They don't give you anything to sort of service that. So if you're coming into it and just starting from the beginning of season 4, you will find yourself, and again, I have a very good memory, I still found myself a couple times thinking, okay, where did we leave this part? Who was that? And I had to remember to put all the dots back together on that stuff. So I'm going to say that if you are not somebody who is equipped with a very, very good memory, you may find yourself a little lost at times. It doesn't diminish the humor, but it does lessen the impact of some of the moments where you're like, oh, that's that character. Well, when did we last see that character? Well, what happened to them? Oh, this person happened here. Like and they've also at the end of, like, by the time we're out through season 4, there's characters upon sub-characters upon sub-characters upon sub-characters. It's a lot to take in. So all that to say, I dug it. I really enjoyed it. I always enjoy it, but it's starting to get a little complicated, and it still doesn't seem like it's hit a crescendo. It doesn't seem like we're near the end. It feels like it's still going to go for, I don't know how much longer, but it really feels like there's more to do. So maybe, dear Netflix, think about doing beginning of the episode recap so we remember where we left everybody.
Yeah, or at least like a season recap, which they sometimes do with series.
Yeah, I checked to see if there was one, and there wasn't, or at least there wasn't when I started watching, because I thought the same thing. I thought, oh, maybe I should watch the season 3 recap. That way I'll just remind myself where we left off. It's probably been over a year since the last one. I'll do that. And I was like, oh, nope, there isn't one of those. And I was like, well, I could watch the entire of season 3 first. I'm like, well, I don't really have time for that. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just sit down and get into it. But I did find myself a few times having to sort of go through the mental memory banks and try and piece together, like, how did things happen between that character and that character? Where did we leave them? Like, it's getting complex, and they've also expanded the universe. It used to be really sort of focused on Dreamland, but now they've introduced Steamland, and they've introduced all these other supporting characters, and yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on.
Cool.
Yeah. So
looking forward to it.
Dig into it. I highly recommend it, but be warned, it is it'll make you think a little more than probably you were looking for going into a show like that.
Cool. Right. Anybody got Jaime?
Couple items. One is a YouTube video entitled "The Star Wars Sequels: Disney's Anti-Trilogy." It's about 25 minutes. I don't know that I necessarily agree with all the conclusions, but I found the analysis of each individual movie was sort of anti the predecessor. So Force Awakens is anti the prequels in general. The Last Jedi is anti The Force Awakens. And then the mess that is Rise of Skywalker is anti The Last Jedi. And kind of an interesting way to think about, what were some of the flaws that we've, covered on this show, sort of put a little bit more succinctly into why did it end up this way? What is it that causes us to feel these certain ways around things?
Yeah, it looks interesting. I watched a bit of it. Haven't got all the way through it, but yeah, it was a interesting take on that. On the whole sort of where do these movies fit, and like the whole thing about the Force Awakens being super fan servicey, right, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like there could even be like a follow-up of, why does something like The Mandalorian work so well? And I think it's because it is very inclusive of pretty much all of Star Wars, right? It's like, hey, this stuff from the prequels, that's in here. Hey, this thing from the sequels, that's in here too.
And the cartoons at that.
Yeah. So I think there's hopefully a path forward here from, like, you'd almost want this video to be sent to the powers that be at Disney, be like, hey, here are the issues, and then here's the things that are great about stuff like the TV series, and see if they can find a happy medium if they ever decide to revisit the large film franchise of Star Wars.
Yeah, I like these analysis style videos that people do, when they sort of almost like they're doing a thesis on something that's been bugging them for a while, right?
Yeah, I've never attended film school, but I assume you have to do stuff like this when you're learning how to do film school stuff.
Yeah. Yep. And what else you got?
The other thing I've got, and the reason it's on the watch list is because I sort of assumed you gentlemen would not have seen Halo, which is a Paramount Plus exclusive, apparently even in Canada. And since you all, your socialized sci-fi means you do get Star Trek stuff, you've not had to fork out the monies, the toonies for Paramount Plus. Right? So I ended up watching the first episode. I will say I'm coming at this from somebody who's played the games, at least the first 3. Halo 2, 1, 2, and 3. I'm not super hardcore into the lore, so stuff where this diverges from the lore is not going to impact me so much. I thought the first episode was pretty fun. It is definitely more mature focused. You have teenagers in the first 10 minutes getting blown away, and there is like no holding back on that. The setting is kind of interesting, that it takes place a bit before where the original Halo game started. It's set in an era where humanity has colonized different worlds. As often happens, those colonies are like, hey, we don't want to have fealty to you anymore, and empires and colonies, etc., etc. The humans are basically already fighting each other when we start the story, and then, oh no, here comes the hypothetically unifying threat of the Covenant, the aliens, who are even worse. And seeing the heroes from the first game, the Spartans, and especially Master Chief, viewed as, from the colonists and rebels standpoint, of like, these are horrific monsters. I can't believe they're here to help us. It doesn't feel like they're here to help us, right? It's like having a wolf join you to fight a bear, kind of thing, right? That's sort of the idea. So that part is pretty cool. The budget is, I feel like it's pretty good, but I know that people are going to complain about it because it's, I don't think it's going to look as good when you compare it to something like Star Trek Discovery. And I think the reason is not because there's less budget, although I've not fact-checked the budget. I think it's because something like Star Trek Discovery has more areas where they can do cheap stuff, right? Like, okay, we've had a sequence of pew pew pews, and we've had Saru hanging around. Let's have Michael and Book talk for like 10 minutes to make things up. Whereas in Halo,
or put in a wasteful primal scream scene.
Yeah, and they can reuse like beautifully made sets. Yes, obviously it takes a lot of money to make the Discovery's bridge, but then you only make it the once, and then you can just keep reusing it, right? Here in Halo, at least from this first episode, I'm like, man, that's a lot of like one-off stuff that I don't know that they're going to use again. And so they got and the main character is like constantly in the suit, and he constantly has to look, a lot bigger than everybody else. So it's kind of like you take even the same amount of budget and you got to peanut butter it over the same amount of episodes, but you have a harder time doing the really cheap stuff. It makes me think that, they're going to have to stretch the budget in some places, and that's going to necessarily make it feel like less than a movie, but it's by no means a CW show, right? So I mentioned Supergirl fan. I knew every time they had Supergirl do something cool, for every minute that Supergirl's powers were active, you needed at least 5 to 10 minutes of, talky talk stuff that's cheap.
Yep.
Halo can't quite get away with that aspect because of just the nature of the story. So all in all, I was pretty excited. I'll continue to watch this. I don't know that it's a high enough recommendation for me to tell you gentlemen to like, oh yeah, you should definitely subscribe to Paramount Plus, except for after it ends and then binge it all, I think.
Yeah, I think this is, I'll file this one to the same category that you filed so many other things, Jaime, which is inevitably when we need the service, I will take the time to watch it. I don't know that I'll run out and buy the service just to get it, though. Yeah,
I don't think it's like clearly Microsoft is meaning this to be like a marquee kind of thing. Without getting too spoilery, I feel like they're trying to make it like a Mandalorian kind of thing is what I sort of got the sense. It's got its own...
do we see the Master Chief with his mask off?
We do, which I'm a little surprised they went that fast into it. I kind of thought it'd be like the Mandalorian, where it'd be well into season before you'd have that. But they do. They show Canada's half-own Schreiber. I think his name is Pablo Schreiber.
Pablo Schreiber, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a big dude. Makes sense.
Cool. All right. So for me, oh my God, Rebels is so good.
Wait a minute. Sorry, can you repeat that?
I said Rebels is so good. I saw Dave Filoni speak at WWDC when he just started working on this series. And just, of course I had to get through all the Clone Wars and the movie. Actually, it's funny, I had seen the movie before. It was so bad I'd forgotten.
Oh, it's for the best, yeah.
Yeah, because that the cousin of Jabba the Hutt.
Zero the Hutt, yeah.
Is he in Clone Wars again?
Yeah, because there's the whole plot line where he's in jail as a result of that story. And
So I did remember his that particular character. It's hard to forget. He sounds like a Truman Capote.
He sounds exactly like Truman Capote.
Yeah, so that's why I recognized. As soon as I got to him, I realized, I have seen this movie before.
Yeah.
And Ahsoka's really young in that one.
Yeah, anyway, she's supposed to be like a 14-year-old.
But coming back to Rebels, and what was good about it was to sort of find out how she ends up with Anakin and Obi-Wan. But Rebels is really good. It's an interesting take. The animation style is really, really good. It's it's evolved away from, sort of up a notch from where Clone Wars leaves off, sort of thing. Because I mean, even though they did the last season of Clone Wars, they went back and did it, right? They mimicked the style.
Yep.
Obviously, they had taken some of the polish from Rebels, but it's really polished, really well. Looks good. The story so far is interesting. I'm only about 3 or 4 episodes in, but definitely it was worth the wait for sure. So definitely recommend Rebels if you haven't already seen it, right?
Yeah, and it is a series that is in a very recognizable time frame. Like it really is part of the universe that seems familiar. It seems familiar if you're into Rogue One. It seems familiar if you're into the original trilogy. It is so much closer in the timeline to the original trilogy that it stormtroopers look like stormtroopers and TIE fighters look like TIE fighters, and it really does sort of fit in your mind as part of the original trilogy in a satisfying way.
Yeah, and you even have James Earl Jones at the very, very beginning of it, right? So he hasn't come back yet, but yeah, and they talk about Tarkin and how he's sort of running scams and stuff like that, which is good, cool. And then I did manage finally to get my hands on a copy of No Time to Die, the latest James Bond Daniel Craig vehicle, and like most James Bond movies, it does not disappoint. There were some obviously telegraphed story points that I could, I kind of got the sense they would, he puts the one girl on the train and says, I'll never see you again. Yeah, sure. Okay. Famous last words, right? The evil guy, the protagonist, wasn't so bad. I was a little worried about that particular portrayal because I like the actor in a lot of other things he's done, but it wasn't over the top. I really liked the Blofeld dude. I forgot his name now. Christopher Waltz or something like that. Yeah. He was really interesting. Christoph Waltz, yeah, and he was really good, and and it's interesting because this style of Bond, Dan, right from the very first movie that Daniel Craig was in as Bond, he's sort of the rough and tumble. What do you call that? Parkour, where you jump from building to building.
Yeah.
Like very much that style of fighting and. And man on man, hand to hand combat kind of style that he brought to this particular character, which all the other guys before were a little worried about mussing up their suits. He's not so much. So it's interesting to see him, in this portrayal. But a typical James Bond movie. It has a big long adventure. There's things that are introduced at the very beginning of the movie that come around in the end, and typical, kind of spy crafty kind of things, so yeah, really enjoyable. So I don't know, did you enjoy it, John?
I did. It's funny because most Bond movies where the actor playing Bond is leaving, it's not as conclusionary. This was very much the first time for any of the Bonds that they built their movies as sort of an arc, and they sort of told a sort of beginning to end kind of 5-movie story that has a sort of beginning, middle, end. They've never done that before. And so this being the sort of ending chapter, I did find it a little paint by numbers. And, I know your criticism that you constantly go to for Star Wars Episode 3 is that, the last half an hour where it's like, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and then then Leia gets dropped off here, and Luke gets dropped off here, and it's sort of paint by numbers. I felt like that was a little bit how we were going at it at times in this movie, where it felt like they were sort of hitting a checklist of, well, we don't need that character anymore, so we can just kill them off here, and we don't need to, build on this anymore because he's not going to have to worry about that. And it just, to me, it took a little bit of the fun out of it. It really felt, I think that's what my only really strong objection to the whole 5th movie for him was, it felt a little joyless.
Really?
Now, Craig's Bond has been far less joyful than previous Bond excursions. He's not as it's obviously it was the Bourne influence. It was the Jason Bourne movies spun in between the Pierce Brosnan and the Daniel Craigs were the Bourne movies, and the Bourne movies informed this in a way of being a little grittier, being a little more physical, being a little dirtier. But there's still been, Daniel Craig's very charming, and he flirts well, and so some of that stuff was still mixed into some of this stuff. But this one felt, between the relationship with his, the Bond girl, and the relationships with his work, and it all just felt really dour, and that I didn't find myself just enjoying the characters maybe as I had in the past, just because it felt a little bit more just sort of all heading towards an inevitable conclusion. I don't know.
So do you think the 007 character, though, do you think she's going to come back as a Bond, or is that just sort of
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, I'll be really curious. It would be a really bold move to just pick up the story after No Time to Die and try and do something different. I suspect that what they'll probably do is start from a different point in time and approach it from a completely different angle, and like with so many Bond iterations previous to this, you can enjoy them all separately, but don't bother trying to find the connections between them, because they're really...
Well, and he's not like the Doctor. He can't regenerate.
Well, that's it, right? So
spoilers.
Yeah, so it's not... I don't think Lashana Lynch is going to come back as 007, right. In the next...
Moneypenny might as well. She wasn't the original Moneypenny in the first Craig movie, though, was she?
She's been the only Moneypenny that they've had. They didn't introduce her until the second movie, and then the third movie. And then Ray Fiennes as M, and yeah, but then again, that has a natural storyline if you watch all those movies between the transition between the two M's, and I don't know. I'll be really curious to see if they carry them forward. Ben Winshaw as Q, if any of that stuff is sort of carried forward, or if they just burn it all down and start from scratch with a new Bond and everything else.
Was Judi Dench Q during, or M during
Pierce Brosnan?
Pierce Brosnan?
Yes.
Oh, she was. Okay.
Yeah, okay. She was M for all of those, plus all of half of the Daniel Craigs. Spoilers.
Yeah, exactly. And Voldemort is pretty typically Voldemort-ish.
Yeah, Ray Fiennes he's fine. I mean, have you seen this movie? Sorry, we're talking in circles around it, but
yeah, I have, and I guess spoilers for the credits. It says James Bond will return. So
exactly,
don't worry, folks.
It's been around for 50 plus years. It's not going anywhere.
Well, that's why I made the Doctor joke, because that's been around 50 years too, right? So
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I can't decide what would be a more satisfying next iteration, to start from a completely different point, or to try and actually pick it up from a different thing where they're like, hey, congratulations, agent. By the way, your name is now James Bond. You are 007. Off you go.
They brought the Aston Martin back too, which was kind of a throwback to Sean Connery as well, right?
Well, but they brought it back because they originally brought it back for Skyfall, and then they destroyed it in Skyfall, and then it apparently took the time between Skyfall ending and all of the last movie plus part of this movie to get it repaired, although it blew up in Skyfall. So, well,
did you see the Blu-ray just started, or the 4K whatever just started playing the behind the scenes stuff when the movie was finished after the titles ended, right? And they had 10 of them. Did you see that?
No.
They had 10 of these cars. They had like 3 actual ones. They had one that was the beauty shot for whenever he was getting in and out of it. And then they had a bunch of replicas made up.
Huh.
Which is really kind of cool. Like the one with the bullet-ridden one, and the one with the Gatling guns, and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember the Gatling guns from the 60s movie, though. But there was a gun in the front. I remember that. Was that wasn't Goldfinger, was it?
Gatling guns? Wasn't that
No, I mean the Aston Martin when Sean Connery drove it.
Oh, no, that was Dr. No. It was the first one, wasn't it?
Dr. No, right, yeah.
I thought it started there, and they had the BMW license during the Brosnan era?
They did, yeah.
Yeah. No, but the one with the ejector seat, was that the first movie?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I guess that's it for another week. So I guess people want to get in touch with you, Jonathan. Where would they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPK News.
And how many people can get in touch with you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevTheHair.
All right. Once again, my name is Timitra. Timmitra is how you spell it on the internet machine Twitter thing. Twitterverse? Twitter? I don't know. Twitter machine? Twitter machine. Anyway, try not to ad-lib, Tim. Yeah. So until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye. Or maybe in the past. We're not sure. Okay. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spockcast podcast. This is Jean-Luc Picard. Shut up, Wesley. Sorry, say again. Just the tag. Gotcha. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
I gotta be honest, I'm a little disappointed you haven't done the Richard Pryor Superman 3 shave up percentage of a penny, get it deposited into your Swiss account racket. I really feel like that's a missed opportunity.
How do you know that would happen?
Well, you know, that you haven't looped me in on it then, I think is my disappointment.
The plot line's so nice they used it twice because it's the same plot line for Office Space, right? So,
That's right.
It is, yeah.
Yep, but they do call it out. At least they give them credit.
Yeah.
becomes an homage at that point.
Yeah.
Oh, they talk about they mentioned it at Superman or
yeah, they're like, didn't you see Superman 3?
Yeah. Well, do you know why they put ridges on the edge of a quarter and dimes?
For blind people?
No, it's for exactly that reason. They can tell whether it's been shaved off or not.
Oh, yeah. Well, they stopped using actual silver in those coins and nickel in nickels. Like how many years ago? 35.
Oh, are you sitting down?
Yeah.
How many pennies do you have in your pocket right now?
I generally don't have cash, but I do actually have a little cash thing here that has I think two pennies, I don't know, probably 5 quarters, a couple nickels, and a couple of tokens to like a Chuck E. Cheese or something, I guess.
Well,
that's how long this been sitting here. Those little
so
cup.
The thing about the U.S. penny is it costs about 2.5 cents to make a penny.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just dumb.
Well, Tim, we splurge on things in the US of A. Let me tell you about an apocryphal story, given that we're in a wartime kind of era. So,
yeah,
this apocryphal story says that some Japanese commander during World War II realized how hosed they were when they said, "What is that ship?" as part of the convoy for the US battleships. They're like, "Oh, yeah, that's the ship that has all the ice cream because we don't let our sailors drink, so to keep morale up, we use ice cream as a treat." And he's like, "You have an entire ship just for ice cream?" So pennies, Tim, are a luxury we continue to keep around.
Yeah, it's like the Apple displays, right? Anyway, that's funny. All right,
I have a follow-up. I wanted to ask this last week, but we were going so damn long, I didn't want to throw it into a very long episode. But now I can throw it in. Jaime, we are now more than 3/4 of the way through the NHL season. We got our first trade between the Seattle Kraken and Toronto Maple Leafs this week. But beyond that, we also got we've got the Seattle Kraken hanging out at second worst in the entire league. How is the vibe in Seattle, given that their first season is more of a traditional expansion team route, which is to say pretty disorganized, a little sloppy, and building clearly for the future?
Yeah, it's something I can contrast with the Seattle Sounders, who started, a little over a decade ago, where right out of the gate, the Sounders were good, and the city was really, jazzed up for them. I think the scraping the bottom of the barrel. I thought they were last in the league. Apparently, the Coyotes are a little worse.
No, Canadians. The Montreal Canadiens.
Are you serious?
As of yesterday, the Canadians were dead last, which truly brings me a joy like I cannot describe.
Yeah. Okay. So it's so dampened here. Like, you do see people with gear. You do see the gear at the various stores and stuff, but I don't hear people really buzzing about it. And it's kind of unfortunate. Like, having seen their games, I still don't know what defense looks like. From the Seattle Kraken standpoint, it appears to be we're going to score a lot of goals no matter what, and just hope that the other team just misses. Right, like they have what appears to be an empty net strategy for the entire season. So they're like, "Oh, we're trading this defender." I'm like, "Good," because they suck. Like, keep all the guys who can make goals, and then just get rid of anybody who's got defense in their job description, because we were just terrible at defense. Can I do the differential? So points for, or goals for, goals against. Looking at records here, 228 goals. 168 goals for is not shabby. It's not league leading by any means, but not shabby. But when you're giving up 228, I'm like, oh man, not too many top tier teams giving up that many, So fans here, to sort of wrap it up, are way more interested in the Sounders season that has started, and thankfully they're not locked out anymore. Major League Baseball season to watch the Mariners, bad news bears their way to another season.
I would have thought that all the talk this week would have been about the Seahawks trading their quarterback. That would have been that was drama
a couple weeks ago. With all the memes from Castaway with
Wilson,
with people photoshopping Pete Carroll's head onto Tom Hanks and Russell Wilson's head onto the volleyball.
Oh my god, that's funny.
Yeah, so people still talk about it here in sports radio of what's going on with the Seahawks. Are they blowing up the team? Like what's exactly is going on? We got a lot of draft picks. People are starting to wonder, hey, okay, so Deshaun Watson, for all of his sexual related drama, ended up not going to the Seahawks. So maybe, and this is fan based, not based on anything, like Baker Mayfield might be realistic, but Kaepernick, I mean, why not? Why not take a chance? If you were down for Deshaun Watson, you absolutely should be down for Kaepernick from a not a skills standpoint, but from a controversy standpoint.
Yeah, I still think you're better off making a small trade. At this point, you can get Baker Mayfield for pennies on the dollar. But that one still kind of baffles me a little bit. The way that those ones have worked out. But I mean, it was probably time for Wilson to go. But yeah, I mean, that AFC West now is terrifying. But, on behalf of the local football fans, most of whom I am not, most of whom are Bills fans, the Bills are like doing a jig now because the AFC West is going to beat the living tar out of each other. And then the Bills get to play what's left over.
Wow. So I have a question. I'm confused. What do they call it? The March Madness thing, the Final Four? What's it called?
The NCAA men's basketball tournament?
Is that what it's for? Final Four? Mm-hmm. What's it called? Yeah. Okay. So I was watching a bit of the game just before we started the recording here, the Arkansas Hogs or something like that versus some other team. And it said second, and they were playing the last 15 seconds, but it said, do they do overtime or something like that?
Yes, it's
four periods, right?
It's a knockout tournament, so there's no draws or ties.
Yep.
So they play 4 periods, and then they have, or whatever, 2 halves. What is it?
The NBA plays two. Yeah. If your college basketball plays 2 halves, the NBA plays 4 quarters.
Oh, I see. So the second half. So are they like 15? You mean like they play like 30-minute half periods or whatever?
No, they're not playing 48 minutes. They're playing 20-minute halves. I think 2 20-minute halves.
I think so. So the end of the second is the end of the game. Yeah, because they were like. The team that was below the Arkansas team was trying to get back up again, and they got a bad call and blah blah blah. But man, those kids sure can do free throws. Not like I find that I don't know. Anytime I ever watch the NBA, they just can't seem to throw free throws.
Yeah. The Zags went down tonight too. That's pretty funny. The Gonzaga, which was one of the favorites going in. This has been a whole thing full of upsets, but the Zags got knocked out tonight too. So. Mm-hmm. Going to be an interesting Final Four. Definitely. I think there was a great one from ESPN the other day. They were saying after the second round of action of the like 7 million entries into the contest for picking the right bracket, every single one of them was eliminated. Like no one was going to have the guesses right. Not one single person out of the millions of people that cast a ballot, because there have been so many upsets and unpredictable things happening.
Yep.
I'm going to try to write some notes here to help you out, Tim. Give me a sec.
Oh, no, trust me, like this will leave my brain after this episode's over and I'll never think about it again. I often think about you when I see goaltenders getting scored on, though.
Empty net syndrome, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I've never heard it played that way, yeah.
I'm going to paste into our Slack a clip from tonight's Canada versus Costa Rica World Cup qualifying match. So Canada is in Costa Rica, which is a tough place to play in spite of the fact that they're not like an elite talent. If Canada wins tonight, they could clinch a spot in the World Cup for the first time in more than 30 years. And Canada is now playing the entire second half a man down based on a call. And you'll see what precipitated the call in the little video clip that I just put in there. And it makes me want to throw my phone for distance.
Why?
It's a typical soccer call. Basically, one of the Canadian guys got a yellow card early, and then later on he walks by one of the other players on Costa Rica, and the guy in Costa Rica grabs his face, falls down, and just starts writhing from like no contact. He literally did not touch his face, and the guy is in so much pain that he does that. The Canadian player got assessed another yellow card and got kicked out of the game, so they're a man down for the entire second half because of this nonsensical call. But oh my god, soccer sometimes. I'm like, I enjoy soccer when it's played well, but this stuff just makes me hate the sport with such a deep hatred. Honestly, I was thinking today could be like the best soccer day I've had since Germany won the World Cup a few years back, because Canada could qualify for the World Cup and the Italians got eliminated from the World Cup earlier today, which is awesome because I cannot stand the Italian soccer team because as anyone who is a fan of the German squad knows, they own the German squad, which sucks, but they also are they're affectionately nicknamed the Italian national diving team because they are so unscrupulous that they spend more game on their sides rolling around pretending to be injured than they do actually trying to score. So
yeah, I think that there's some stuff that could be done to reduce the flopping like that. Like, it's hard to do it without slowing down the game, so you probably want to start out with anything that's going to result in a card. So not normal fouls, but I think like the situation described, we're going to give this guy a card. I was like, let's look at the replay. Oh, actually, it's the other guy. And for faking it, it's an automatic red card.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So now you've no longer incentivized people to do it in that sort of way. Would help, I think. Because let me tell you, like, you're talking about the men's game. Men's game is like this. For reasons that do not make sense to me, the women's game is not like this. They do not.
No, the women's games are fantastic. The women's games are fantastic.
Bloody each other. It is murder out there. And I don't understand why that is so different.
It's so funny because women's soccer and women's rugby are two of my favorite things to watch. They are so competitive and there's such exciting competition. I love it. I love it at the highest level. But I cannot stand women's high-level hockey because they don't let them hit each other. I don't understand. Like, women aren't delicate flowers. This is nonsensical. Just let them play the game. I want to see the Canadian girls go out there and just run the American women into the boards. Like, come on. Like, what's the rationale that the women can't handle the impact of another woman to the boards? Like, that's nonsensical. Honestly, the dirtiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life up close, I used to be a photojournalist, as you'll recall, and the dirtiest thing I've ever seen up close was provincial level women's soccer. Or not women's soccer, women's rugby. I watched a woman go to tackle another woman and literally put her hand on the back of the other woman's head and ride her like a surfboard up the field and ran her face into the ground for like 5 feet. It was so violent. I could not get over it. And I know that's exactly what happened because I happened to photograph the entire sequence. So you can literally see it's like comes up behind her, grabs the back of her head, puts her knee into her back, puts her face into the ground, and surfboards her up the field. It's crazy. It's crazy how violent that sport is.
Crazy.
Tim, looping back here. So I threw in, you're not going to find this on Wikipedia. This is my own sort of rough notes for you on the NCAA basketball tournament is the tourney, right? It's the thing that people are doing all of the brackets for. It's approximately equal to March Madness. March Madness is more like the spirit of the season when you go into the tournament because it's so long in terms of how much time it takes. There are, when you look it up, technically 7 rounds. This bothers me. For somebody who's like, well, I remember back in the days when it was 64 teams that made it to the tournament. And then they sort of squeezed and said, it's 64-ish. There's a 65th team that plays the 64th before the tournament. And then they kind of like that and they extended it out. It's technically 68 in the 0th round. I'm calling it, this is like the extra play-ins because, there's a lot of money here. So they squeezed in some extra stuff. 68 teams in the 0th round. The traditional first round is 64. The second round is 32. The third round is the Sweet 16. The fourth round is the Elite 8. The fifth round is the semifinals with 4 teams, and then the finals with 2 teams. So it's, divisible by 2 because you have a guarantee of 1 winner in this knockout tournament. There's no round robin or anything like that, like the World Cup or etc. No ties, no draws. Win or go home.
Sure.
And it's without fail, it's really fun because those kids are playing their guts out in a way that professional players really only reserve for like important playoff games. So they are just going so fast, so hard, competing so hard, and their emotions are just bubbling to the surface. So it's very dramatic and really fun to watch if you're a sports fan. But that also makes that level of intensity also makes it look really hard. Like some of these student athletes, this is the apex of their athletic careers. They're not going to go to the NBA. They're not going to go play in Europe. This is sort of the best it's going to get. And for some of them, it's crushing. Like this is going to be the thing that like wakes them up in a cold sweat for the rest of their lives and stuff. So it's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how different sports handle their minor leagues. It was a shock to me maybe 15, 16 years ago. I still barely know anything about hockey as it is, but the minor league hockey team, the Seattle Thunderbirds, I went to one of their games. One of the first years I was here in Seattle, moved to Seattle. And I remember looking at them and being like, are these like kids? I kind of expected them to be, college age, roughly. Like if you didn't go to college for hockey, playing, like maybe you played this sort of thing. So I thought it'd be kind of more like college basketball is essentially the minor leagues for the NBA, or college football is essentially the minor leagues for the NFL. And it turns out, no, actually hockey is way more like Major League Baseball, where there are tons of different minor leagues, and they really are like dang kids when they start playing ostensibly professionally for their NHL team. Between minor league teams.
Yeah, between the pressures for kids, the pressure starts for them when they're in their, tween years to sort of start to rise above the crowd if they want to get noticed to go play in the major junior leagues across North America. And then from there, it goes up another notch to got to get the attention of the NHL scouts. And if you're not going to get those, you got to try to get the attention of the U.S. college scouts, because you can still get a scholarship and go play for Michigan or UMass or one of those places that's like Minnesota, places that are like real hockey schools, and get your education paid for. Or again, beyond that, it's maybe I can get a chance to go catch on in any number of leagues around the world that are willing to pay people to play hockey. But yeah, it's quite a competitive system from like 12 up, and you can get paid to play hockey starting at 15, which is maybe just a scotch wrong. Like that's a lot of pressure to put on kids.
Yep. Right, just the same in the States with football and basketball. And
100%, yeah.
Yeah, it's just I guess soccer is another one where they start out pretty young, where if you're like not in an elite academy by like 13, 14, you're probably not going to play professionally in like the EPL. But college football and college basketball are, yes, you would kind of expect that prior to that, you probably went to like a pretty top tier, well-known school that high school that did that. And you probably would, in the modern era, be started to be scouted around middle school. But that's more like scouted and less you're straight up part of this team. And here you go, let's send you off to this affiliate in San Diego or Milwaukee or something. I had to analogize it in my head, like, oh, I understand how baseball works. I guess that's how hockey works too. But I didn't know that. Casually going, oh, these are going to be like grown men playing hockey, right? So what is this? Is this like the in-between periods thing where the little kids play? Oh, no, wait, these are the players. Okay, got it.
Well, and it's truly different too, because they the way that because it is a fully salary capped league, unlike baseball, and I mean, football has a salary cap. Give me a break. Baseball has a salary cap. Give me a break. But it's not even a soft cap like they have in the NBA, where you can go over it and pay a tax. There is no tax in the NHL. If you go over the salary cap, you forfeit games. So there's no wiggle room on salary. And in order to circumvent that, when they put the hard cap in 15 years ago and they started doing that, what that's led to over the last decade and a half is you need to have a good draft system, bring in young players and put them in the lineup at 18, 19, 20 years old when they're making the least amount of money that they're allowed to be paid, so that you can pay the more established players the salary that they need in order to be satisfied. But also that means that the older players, which used to, there was a stretch there where we were getting players playing well into their 40s and beyond, and not a small number of them. Now, older players are really the exception because they just can't afford them unless they're going to sign to like really cheap contracts. And that's usually what happens is you start out getting paid a little bit compared to, your age and experience. You get good, you get paid in your sort of prime years, and then if you want to stick around in the league, you start signing like 1 year, $1 million, 1 year, $2 million contracts, because that's the only way to stick around, because nobody wants to commit to term and money to those players because they can't afford it with the salary cap being so restrictive. So it really has changed the game. It's made it a lot younger, a lot faster, but it also has a sense of impermanence too. Like I find hockey now, like I haven't been following it as religiously the last number of years just because of a number of factors, but this is the most disconnected I've felt to the league in a long time, as far as I don't know who half these guys are anymore. And I used to be able to encyclopedically tell you the top 10 guys on any team. Now they change so fast, and they're just bringing in more and more new young players to try and keep the cap low. I can't keep up anymore, and I don't care enough to do so.
I'm kind of a fan of the NFL's model, where it has a hard salary cap that ye verily no team shall go over, but it avoids the problems of let's say like baseball, where you can't be a cheap owner where the entire Pittsburgh Pirates team makes less than like Jason Giambi for the New York Yankees sort of thing. Like there is a hard salary floor, and it's not too far off of the salary cap. Like you're kind of incentivized to win, because guess what? You're paying almost as much as an owner, sucking and losing all your games as you are winning all your games and winning the Super Bowl, right? Like you might as well actually try. It does mean that there is a lot of back and forth between kind of want to win a Super Bowl while your quarterback is on his rookie cheap contract and not on his, oh no, he's a Pro Bowler, now he's costing a lot of money kind of thing. So I feel like that's something I'd like to see the various leagues do. A hard salary cap, hard salary floor, and don't make them too far away from each other.
But the only reason that works in the NFL is because the NFL is the only league that has non-guaranteed contracts. That's the only way that works, is if you can basically you have to pay people signing bonuses, but the bonuses don't always count against the cap, and then you can cut them if they get hurt, which is despicable and loathsome, and one of the reasons why I despise American football. But that's one of the huge advantages that they have, is that they broke the union into tiny little pieces 30 years ago, and the unions never rebounded from that. So they have non-guaranteed contracts. So you can sign up $300 million contract as a star quarterback, and you can say, I want X number of dollars up front, but if you blow out your knee, they can cut you, and then you don't get that money. And that's bloody awful is what that is. That's inhumane, and frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of racist. So
that's why you see a lot of analysis after the headlines in the modern NFL for the very reasons you talked about. We're like, oh, so and so signed for X million dollars over how many years. People are like, what's the real contract?
What's the guarantee? What's the guaranteed amount?
The guaranteed upfront, and then at what point of like, it's like a 5-year deal, but really it's like a 4-year deal with an extra thing for the team, because they can remove him pretty easily after the 4th year, if he's not producing, and give him less money, or continue on to keep him. And for the players' side, when they figured out the teams were doing this, their agents have generally gotten better about like, give me enough money that I can like retire comfortably, sort of thing. Now, granted, that's only for the best of the best players. The league minimum's like $500K, which is a lot. And the flip side of that is that
the average lifespan of an NFL lineman is like 48. So live comfortably for the rest of my life is also a bit of a misnomer when it comes to the NFL, right?
Yeah, it's tough. Running backs don't last after 30. Quarterbacks can, kickers can, but you're probably under 30 when you leave the NFL.
Yeah,
for most people.
Yeah, I think I read, and this one is a number of years back, but I think the average career in the NFL was like less than 3 years. If you average them all out between the people who, straggle and the people who succeed beyond that, it averages out to about 3 years. And you're right. And in that course of time, they're making like $1 million, $1.5 million. Well, that sounds great, except that, I've made more than that in my career too. So, and I still have all my brain function and my knees work. So, like it's not necessarily as glorious as it seems from the outside sometimes.
Yeah. It's not like, people look at Tom Brady and he's like unreasonably old to be playing in the NFL. Like he's just one of those guys that most people don't make it. Again, you mentioned 3 years. So these guys are normally coming out of college at 22. So it's like 25, 26 when they're done with their career normally. And if you want the horrors of what can happen to you, I'm sure we could find this on YouTube somewhere. I watched the one of those NFL documentaries or ESPN documentaries around
the 30 for 30. There's a great 30 for 30 about that.
I don't know if we saw the same one, but what stuck in my mind as a young lad was seeing Jerome Bettis. This is like Pittsburgh Steeler, huge guy called the Bus from the Pittsburgh Steelers, running back. And after he retired, after they won their Super Bowl, they showed him getting like off the couch or out of bed, and it looked like a nightmare. He's just knees and back are so busted up.
Yep.
That poor guy. He's pretty young too for having that sort of problem.
And at least in his career, he got to be a Pro Bowler. He got to win a Super Bowl or two. That's
endorsements and stuff.
Almost a best case scenario versus some of these guys who have their knees destroyed and spend the rest of their lives hobbling around or get so many concussions that they can barely count 2 + 2. It's a tough sport. It's a super super tough sport. Yeah, there was. I'm trying to find it. There was a really good. I don't know if it was the first or second season of 30 for 30. There's a really good one about one of the players who he was supposed to be this incredible player, and then it just never worked out for him because of different circumstances, and it's just this incredible like. Everything that was supposed to be this incredible, thing for this dude that just never. Oh, here we go. Episode 29, The Best There Never Was. The 1981 recruiting of high school football player Marcus Dupree by multiple big-time college programs, his resulting injury-prone college and professional career, and how his pursuit by college and USFL teams changed the recruiting process. It's really, really excellent. Where they meet him now, and he like lives in like this little sort of tumble down house in like Nowheresville, somewhere in the South. And he's like, I was the greatest thing. Everyone thought I was going to be like all these things. And then a couple injuries later, and I live in a shack in the woods. Like it's crazy that's how thin the margin is.
Yeah, that's the sad story. It's not like the one with is it like American Icon or something like that with Kurt Warner's life, where he was like, bagging groceries, and then, hey, I'm winning a Super Bowl. Like it normally doesn't turn out like that.
Yeah. Those make for great movies, but unfortunately, I think they're the exception, not the rule. Yeah, no, I found myself looking at the NHL standings the other day and thinking about your Kraken. I looked in here; they're tied for third. They're 2 points up on Montreal and Arizona, who are tied for worst. So they're actually they're sitting third worst in the league now. So
moving up the standings, building on something for next year is the positive way of looking at it.
Well, and they did what every good expansion team does. They drafted a bunch of guys. They basically looked at them, decided who they wanted to keep. They traded all the rest of them away at the trade deadline to teams who needed to be bolstered. And then you take those draft picks and you take the prospects and you keep building until you finally do get the glue that starts to stick together. They traded their captain, Mark Giordano, to the Leafs the other day, and he's a perfect example. He was a perfect guy to draft because you're going to get some assets for him. Leafs traded a couple of draft picks and said, we'll take him off your hands, and he fit the role nicely for 60 games as being the first ever captain of the Seattle Kraken. He'll be a trivia question for years in Seattle bars.
Just need some league average defense. I'm not even talking great.
That's funny because that's what the Maple
middle of the road defense.
That's what the Maple Leafs need too. Unfortunately, this season it's not working out so far. Hopefully, Giordano can help a little bit because it's been a bit of a struggle. We've got the $1 million offense. Well, frankly, we've got the $10 million offense, but we don't have is the defense. Once again, we go into playoff Bill saying a prayer that it somehow works out for us.
Yep. Anywho, time to pack it in, I think.
Yep,
already.
We've digressed into sports enough.
Enough sports ball.
That's right.
Okay, talk to you later.
All right, see you next week, guys.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.